What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. For those new here, my name is Peter, aka Pete the Pilot, and today I'm going to talk about airline pilot schedules. So often I'm asked, Pete, how many days a month do you normally work? Pete, how many days a week are you normally off? Pete, where do you usually fly to? Pete, why are you so freaking cool? Nah, I'm just kidding. That last one never gets asked, but the first three really do. So today I'm going to do a video based on my personal airline schedule and hopefully give you an idea of what it's like. Airline pilot schedules are going to differ person to person. They're going to vary greatly based on the company that you work for, the airplane that you fly, and even the seat position and the seniority that you're in, whether you're a first officer or a captain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down my personal schedule from when I first got hired at my cargo legacy company and give you a month-to-month breakdown of my pilot schedule. So I was hired in October of 2020, and then after weeks and months of training, IOE, waiting for paperwork to get settled, I finally got online. March of 2021 was my first full month online flying the 767. As you can see here, here's a screenshot of the month. How it breaks down is in weeks. So March for us was a 4-week bid period, starting from March 1st and going to March 28th. So 28 days, 4 weeks. I was off for 17 of those days and worked 11 of those days. First trip started on March 8th. The first trip started off with a deadhead to Indianapolis. Took a company jump seat from my home in New York to get over to Indy. Checked in the hotel, which the company provides, and my first leg flying the 767 that month was from Indianapolis to Phoenix, Arizona. I was on the ground in Phoenix, Arizona for 45 minutes, quick little turn off to Los Angeles, California. Greased it on, 2-5 left. No, I have no idea. That was over a year and a half ago. No idea what happened there, but LA is one of my favorite layovers, not only because it's beautiful downtown where we get to stay, but one of my best friends, shout out to John and Katie, live right across from one of the hotels that we stay at. So I get to hang out with them, cook, play some tennis, relax, get a workout in. So it's always a lot of fun to see friends. A 35-hour layover in Los Angeles until I had to wake up and fly my next flight, which was from Los Angeles to Memphis. I'm based in Memphis, so my trip ends there, and that concludes my first trip. When I landed in Memphis, since I'm a commuter, it's my job to get home. It's not paid. It's not ideally fun, but just part of doing business and being a commuter at my airline. So I jumped on a company jump seat. That's what the little JS means in that green box, and headed home back to New York. I enjoyed 2 days off until I had a jump seat back to work, where my next trip started on Sunday, the 14th. And as you can see, since it's yellow, it started with a flight from Memphis to Newark. This actually ends up being a great trip for me because we land in Newark. I have about 24-hour layover, and I was able to head home, sleep in my own bed, cook my own food, hang out with my friends. It's always a bonus for an airline pilot when they're layover and they're getting paid to be home. So I always enjoy a nice layover at JFK, Newark, or any of the surrounding airports. Woke up, operated Newark back to Memphis, and that was the completion of the trip. I had another trip that started just a couple hours after I landed in Memphis. This time I went Memphis to Boston, landed runway 4 right, another beauty. Now I'm just making all these up. These were obviously way too long ago for me to remember. But landed in Boston, quick turn, 45 minutes, and they were off to Stewart, Newburgh. Again, close to where I actually grew up in New Jersey. So my mom and dad got to come out, see the airplane. They treated me to dinner, which is always super nice. A quick little layover in the hotel, and it was out the next morning back to Memphis, Tennessee, where my trip ended in Memphis. For that, I enjoyed a nice little stretch of 5 days off. Have no idea where I went, but we'll call it Hawaii because that sounds cool. Why not? Got a little tan, got some sun, went to the beach, said what's up to the locals until I had to start another trip, which was on Tuesday the 23rd. Again, it's blue, so I started with a front end deadhead to Indianapolis. Got myself to Indianapolis, and then my first leg was Indy to JFK. As I've mentioned already before, and you can tell by the airport maps behind me, New York is where I live. So I was able to get home and again enjoy another layover at my house, in my apartment, seeing my friends and family. So always a good bonus for any airline pilot. After 26-hour layover in JFK, I operated back JFK to Memphis. Once I landed in Memphis, again, as a commuter, it's my job to get home. So I hopped in the jump seat and probably headed home, and that was my month. So to wrap it all up, in the month of March, it was a 4-week bid period, 28 days. I operated 11 of those days flying and was off for 17 days. So in my opinion, not too shabby, but that's a first look at my first month online flying the 767 as a first officer. Now we'll take a look at my second month online at my company, which is April of 2021. This was a 5-week bid period. So as you can see, it started on March 29th and went to April. What's after April? May 2nd. So it was a 5-week bid period. First trip started with a deadhead to Indianapolis. So as we know by now, deadheading is when the company gets me into position. So I got myself to Indianapolis and I operated one leg, Indy to Newark, at night, super easy, landed in Newark. And then as you can see, the trip ended with a deadhead from Newark back to my base. Well, as I've spoken many a times now, I live here. So it was a super great trip for me in the fact that when the flight ended, I was able to go home, be home almost a day early. I'm still getting paid and still technically working. So I enjoyed 2 days off at home until I had a front end deadhead out to MTY, which is Monterey, Mexico. So I jumped on a first class flight through Atlanta to get myself to Monterey. When I landed in Monterey, enjoyed some tacos, some tequila, hola, hola, como estas? And then the next morning I woke up and flew from Monterey, Mexico to Memphis, Tennessee. Trip ended in Memphis. Again, I'm a commuter, so when the trip ends in Memphis, it's my job to get myself home. So it's exactly what I did. I jumped on a company jump seat and headed home for the weekend. So I enjoyed the long weekend off, and I started my first stretch of 2 reserve days. Reserve is basically you're on call at my company. It's an hour and a half call out. So you have to be near the airport. So if they call you because a pilot calls out sick, aircraft maintenance, whatever it may be, they need you. You have 90 minutes to get to the airport. So I flew out to Memphis, Tennessee, where I sat reserve. And as you can see, I did not get used. So I got no trips assigned to me, basically hung out, played golf, work out, see friends, do whatever. Basically do whatever you want as long as you're fit to fly and ready to go if and when they call you. After my second day of reserve, I jetted home, was off for the long weekend until I had to be back on reserve Monday through Friday. So I had a 5-day stretch of reserve. The first 3 days I did not get used. On the fourth day, they assigned me a trip to San Diego. Early in the morning, I flew from Memphis, Tennessee to San Diego, California. Enjoyed 24 hours off at the Gas Lamp Quarters in San Diego. And I flew back to Memphis to complete my trip in my reserve period. Now the trips started getting fun, or at least beneficial for me. So I was off for the long weekend, and then as you can see, my fourth trip of the month started with a front end deadhead to Newark. Perfect for me. Ended up operating the next day. So it was another way I added another day off into my month, just living near one of the active airports for our company. The next night, I operated from Newark to Indianapolis. I had a 4-hour sit on the ground until I had to operate Indianapolis to Chicago. My trip ended in Chicago technically because it was a deadhead back to my base. I have really good friends. Shout out Cara, shout out Matt. I think we got some deep dish that night. Enjoyed a few beers, and I think I went to see the Bean. I highly recommend Chicago. Great city when it's not in the winter. So like 3 months out of the year, one of my favorite cities to go visit. Anyway, deadheaded home, back to New York, and enjoyed a little stretch of days off, about 3 or 4 days. And as you can see, my next trip starts with a front end deadhead to Newark. Bingo, bango, bongo. I'm already there. And then I had to operate my longest flight to date at my company. A nice, I call it reverse red-eye transcon. So I operated at 1 a.m. from Newark to LAX. I will tell you right now, it is probably one of my least favorite flights in our system. Yes, great, I get to start at my home airport, but it is very dark, it is very lonely, it is very tiring to depart the East Coast at 1 and arrive on the West Coast around 4:30. But non-negotiable, sucked it up, part of doing business, and on the way we were. Enjoyed 26-hour layover in Los Angeles, played some pickleball, played some tennis, had a good time seeing my friends again, and then had to operate my last leg from Los Angeles to Indianapolis, a nice 3-hour flight because we had some tailwinds heading to Indianapolis. And boom, my trip is complete. I got to deadhead back home, and that wraps up the end of the month. So to recap, in April, it was a 5-week bid period or 35 days. I had 17 days off, but with the deadheads, front end and back end, I was able to make those 21 days or 4 extra days, and I had 18 days on. So how I normally describe airline pilot schedules when I'm talking to people, half on, half off. You can pick up extra trips, you can drop trips. Again, this is gonna vary pilot to pilot. One more month, I'm gonna discuss in detail of my trips and my schedule. That's May of 2021. We're back to a 4-week bid period or 28 days. My first trip started with a deadhead to Indianapolis. You're probably wondering, Pete, why are you in Indianapolis all the time? Well, it's a huge hub for our company, so I go to Indy a lot. Have a good friend there, get to work out. Shout out Kevin if you're watching. And yeah, it's always a good time to be in Indy and have a nice layover downtown. So super early in the morning, I operated Indianapolis to Seattle. It was my first layover in Seattle in a really, really long time. So I actually got to meet up with my friend Liza. Shout out Liza if you're watching. We had dinner, we grabbed some drinks, and I enjoyed a run around that little lake in Seattle. Not downtown, it's kind of near the airport. I think there's a Boeing factory kind of close by. If you know the name of that lake, holler at me in the comments. But one of my favorite layovers, especially when it's not raining and it's sun shining out. I love, love, love Seattle. Enjoyed 25 hours off in Seattle until I had to reverse the route and fly Seattle back to Indy. Was gracious to have those tailwinds and landed in Indianapolis and had about 19 hours downtown Indy. Got a workout in, hung out, ran around the statue downtown there, and then operated the next morning from Indy to Newark, 3 hours on the ground there. So what we basically do is we leave the airplane. We have these little crew lounges that we go and hang out in, eat some food, take our uniform off for a little bit, watch some Netflix, just kind of relax until I had to operate Newark to PDX, Portland, Oregon. Is it Oregon or Oregon? From an East Coaster, I go Oregon, but I could be completely wrong. Anyway, as you can see, the trip ended in Portland. I decided to get the company hotel and then deviate on the deadhead back to Memphis and just take a direct PD lay flat. I think it was JetBlue Mint. Could be completely making that up though, but it was some nice lay flat back to New York. That completed my first trip of the month. I enjoyed the weekend off, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. And then on the 13th and 14th, I started my first stretch of reserve days. I was lucky not to get called, so I just went to Memphis, hung out, worked out, saw some friends, and that was that. Another weekend off, which was nice. And then on Monday the 17th, I started my next trip. But as you can see, deadhead to Newark, shaves an extra day off, gets me an extra day at home, which is always freaking fantastic, and operated Newark to Indy and had a nice little layover in Indy. So I had to wake up the next day and operate Indy to Denver, Denver back to Memphis. And that was the end of my trips in May. So to recap May, 4-week bid period, 28 days. I was off 18 of those days. I was on 10 of those days. Like I said, with the deadheads and stuff like that, I was able to add a few here and there. And that's just based on how I bid and where I live. That's not going to always be the case on every pilot's schedule. That trip, I jump seated to, we'll call it Rome, because that sounds pretty cool, even though it definitely wasn't Rome, and enjoyed about 10 days off to finish out the month. So there's a little glimpse into an airline pilot's schedule. I hope it answered some of your questions, maybe give you a little bit of insight on how it works. And if you're looking to become an airline pilot, expect to have as far as days on and days off. As always, comments, questions below. If you have any personal aviation questions, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. Just make sure you follow me first so I can actually see the message. As always, I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, take care.